U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, thank you so much and welcome to Eye on Politics.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
So how bad is the avian flu outbreak? And you've signaled that your department is going to take a different, way of handling this. And I'm wondering, when is that going to be and what are you looking at?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. We're 8 days on the job, I think, at this point. It's an honor of a lifetime to serve the American people, to serve President Trump as his Secretary of Agriculture. Day one, I'm sworn in and go to my new office at USDA headquarters in Washington. And the very first briefing I have is on the avian flu. Obviously, I had kept up with it and had been studying it on my own. But once I was in the building, working with the different scientists and veterinarians to really try to understand what needs to happen. Listen, this is not a black and white issue. It is sticky. But at the end of the day, we have our poultry industry that is really hurting. We have depopulated millions of birds. The avian flu has, gotten a little bit bigger than it has in the past in terms of, by this time it should have been slowing down. Nothing for the American population to worry about, except the price of their eggs are really high right now. So we've been working night and day to put together what we believe will be a good plan. There is no short-term fix. If there were, it would have been addressed under the last administration. Really under Joe Biden, those prices really spiked, not just for avian flu, but for a lot of other reasons. But working now to bring that back, to have a long-term solution to how we address this issue for our poultry community.
So you're talking about doing more than just killing off the chickens that have it, right?
That's right.
So what are you looking at?
Well, it won't be a surprise for anyone that is from that industry or follows this. There are many tools in the toolkits. We're really working with governors and state veterinarians, trying to understand how to be innovative, what we could look at in terms of more innovation in the biosecurity space. Avian flu, 80 to 90% is spread through wild fowl. What that means is a wild duck flies over a hen-laying barn, defecates on the sidewalk, someone walks through it, walks into the barn, and now all of a sudden you have a huge outburst of avian flu, and the entire barn has to be put down. So what can we do from biosecurity? Let's look more at vaccines. What can we do with therapeutics? On the egg pricing side, is there some short-term import fixes that we could make? There's an all approach that I think has to be discussed. USDA is not the only agency in the federal government that looks at these things. HHS, the Federal Drug Administration within Health and Human Services, Secretary Bobby Kennedy, who was also sworn in on the same day that I was, we're already talking and working together. I think, though, what perhaps is different now than in the last administration is we move at light speed. President Trump has no patience for long bureaucratic processes. So my goal is to move at that light speed, but to marry that with what is the safest, the best way to protect our food supply. Food security is national security. So all of these layers are really important as we look at this issue.
Given what you just said, how quickly do you think that prices of eggs will come down?
I wish I had the answer to that. What I will say is that this is not a short term, right? If we could somehow bring egg prices down in the next few days, there would be nothing more exciting to anyone in this country. No one would be more excited than I would be about that. This is more of a long-term solution. But what I can say is that those prices should start coming down maybe later this spring, this summer, as we work to implement some of these bigger picture solutions. And once we're past Easter, then we'll hopefully have some really good solutions for the American people. I think it's important, though, for your audience to understand that it isn't just eggs, although certainly we're seeing a major shortage of eggs right now, but all food has gone up under the last administration. And listen, I'm not here to necessarily say they're horrible and we're wonderful and they're awful and we're the best. It's not about that. But here's the thing, policy matters. And when you're effectuating policies that put more regulations on the American people, that cause the price of inputs to increase, when you're a state like California that passes Proposition 12, which by the way requires, the chickens have a lot of space and things like that, The price of eggs in California, the average price is over $9.50. The average price across the rest of the country is closer to $5. 4 years ago, when we left the last White House, I was President Trump's policy chief, the price of eggs was around $2. So you can see that policy and inflation combined with the avian flu has really led us to this point.
So what policies are you looking at that you believe will help lower food costs?
Well, it is an across the board, a deregulation. It is lifting a lot of the rules and regulations that were put in place in the last administration, where you drive, listen, the bigger government gets, the more regulators are on your back, the more rules you have to follow, the more that our farmers have to fill out more paperwork, more bureaucratic process. That costs everything, causes everything to increase in cost. And we saw inflation skyrocket in the last administration. Under President Trump, it held very steady for 4 years and in fact went down because we worked around the clock to try to get government off of the back of the taxpayer and the producers in this country. And it actually worked. Cut taxes, cut regulation, the price of everything will go down. So that's really what we're focused on.
One of the farmers in there from the industry in there had mentioned the real concern that they have about in August, Haitians who were allowed protected status by the Biden administration are going to lose that status and perhaps might have to leave the United States. And they were concerned because of the impact that would have on their ability to produce food.
That's right.
And so what message, when you heard that, what was your reaction and what do you do with that information now?
Well, I think it was, she was representing the broiler farmers, and she was very eloquent. Her name was Tia, and she sort of walked through that labor is always an issue for agriculture and in the ag community. And we've got the H-2A program that allows seasonal workers to come in, which a lot of our producers really rely on. And so I think what she was specifically regarding is, as you mentioned, the Haitians who come in, that they are employing in significant numbers in the broiler industry. So now I go back to Washington and look into it and make sure that we have all the information as our producers are facing, potential tariffs, which at the end of the day, the president has asked me to assure all of our ag community that those tariffs will end up actually benefiting our ag community as, we use and rely on more of our own internal food production, but that the labor force is a huge issue, and ensuring that we have the labor that these guys need and girls need to produce what needs to be produced to not only feed America, but to feed the world. You
talked about labor, and I know your department says right now it is optimizing its workforce.
Yes.
And so we've seen, you say you're eliminating unnecessary positions. I'm wondering how many, and I know some of the people who were caught up in that were people who were involved in helping on the avian flu. So I want to ask you about that. Plus, you're having them return to office, and
yes.
What do you say to the employees who were let go?
This is not ever easy, and I think that as perhaps those on the left have framed this as, oh, aren't we all jubilant over here on the right and in this new administration as we're firing lots of people? For me, these are real people who have served hopefully well for some of them years and years. And so that's not an easy thing to do. But at the end of the day, what President Trump promised, what he ran on, what he won, arguably a very historic election, 312 electoral votes, the popular vote, what we believe is a mandate, and that is returning power to the people and moving back to a self-governance way of governing. And under both Democrats and Republicans. I mean, this is not just a Democrat issue. This is, prior Republicans who've been in office who have also leaned into the idea that the government is the solution and we need to create more programs and we need to take more taxpayer dollars. And at the end of the day, 70 to 80% of Americans, both Republican and Democrat, who vote, who work, who pay taxes, believe that their government has gotten too big and is on their back, and it's not okay. And so for an organization or an enterprise like USDA with 106,000 employees, with 29 different departments, not just USDA, but across the government, there is room to downsize to ensure, just like any normal business does, that what everyone is doing every single day is serving the highest and best interest, which is the American people, and at USDA, our agriculture community. So while painful and imperfect, it is important that we go through this process if we have any chance of right-sizing the government, which most people in this country think is too big.
And then just on these employees who were actually working on avian flu.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that was before I got there, but it is my understanding that as part of that initial wave of layoffs, and it's been, you know, this has been in phases, that some of those who were working on avian flu were actually laid off. I think that immediately came to the acting leadership at USDA, and they were immediately, it's my understanding, immediately redeployed back into their jobs, because clearly with the health of the industry and arguably the health of America at stake, those are very important people and workers to some of the most important issues facing our country right now.
U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.